we took this car down to Whynot to the World Championship for the Factory Stock Challenge. It was like $3,000 to win. Nearly 50 factory stocks entered in that race. We came in like 13th in the big show on a full dry slick track. We were the fastest leaf spring car there. This car was performing beautifully. So we took it off the trailer, we brought it in here, we're going to put it on the scales, we're going to show you all the numbers, all of the measurements and everything. We're going to get on the dry race board because I want to show y'all what I've learned about the differences between coil spring cars and leaf spring cars and why that can be challenging as the track is changing. A lot going on in this episode, so y'all stick around. Alright, so I'm setting everything back to exactly what it was when I ran it in the feature. I think on my air pressure, I had like 18 on the right front, 16 on the right rear. I had 14 here on the left rear and 15 on the left front. Don't worry about writing any numbers down right now. I'll write down everything on a dry race board toward the end of this video where we can kind of walk through all the numbers together, and then you could pause it and look at that stuff or whatever you need to do. So don't worry about that part. Okay, so here's an important point on our scale numbers for this episode. I put weight in the driver's seat to represent me. I got it as close and accurate as I could. That took a lot of weight for me to get there. But I've got it in there. So the scale numbers we're going to look at, the ride heights we're going to look at, everything, that's with the driver in the car. So that's as accurate as we can get it. I'm going to try to give y'all some good data on this. All right, so let's get this thing on the scales. All right, let's get this stuff laid out here. This old ProForm set of scales, well, I tell you what, I am ready for a set of those cordless scales. And they are becoming more affordable. But I'm going to run these ProForms until they quit working. They are still going strong. They just keep on working. Oh yeah, that's what I was looking for. All right, let's put some numbers up on the dry erase board and see what we got. Check these numbers out. So you see my raw numbers over here, left front, left rear, right rear. So I got 814 and 672 on the front, 902 and 807 on the rear for 3195 as the total. Percentage-wise, that put 53.7 on the left side of the car. The cross ended up at 49.1. I show it. I don't really pay a lot of attention. I don't drive for a cross number, y'all. Just be aware of that. Rear percentage, it came down to 53.5. I was comparing my notes. And when I took the car down there without the lead bolted on the front and stuff, I was at 54.5. So I shifted some lead around, bolted some lead on. And so it did drop at 1 percentage point. I don't think it affected the car at all. I think it was plenty of rear percentage at 53.5. Left rear bite, that's the one that can be a shocker. 95 pounds, that's it. That's all the bite. And this is a leaf spring car and only has 95 pounds of bite in it. And when I look at what I set up to take it down to Whynot, I'd only set it up with 113 pounds. So that slight difference there, that's just from me changing wheel spacers, rollout on the car stagger-wise changing, and moving the lead around. That's the only difference it made. I didn't intentionally crank in or out any bite at all on this car. So these are the numbers. Definitely, these are numbers for dry, slick. And let's see, next up, I want to go through the ride heights on the car. I want to show you where I'm at on ride heights and then how I measured it because everybody measures it different. So let's do that. Okay, so I use a steel ruler, and you see this is a carpenter's ruler here. And I set it on the floor, and of course I'm on the scale pads, but my scale pads are exactly 2 inches tall, so I just subtract 2 inches from my number. But I put it right here across the front of my bolt that goes through the lower control arm right there, and I get my measurement that's the center of that bolt. That's the most accurate place to measure. Everybody's frames are different. They get bent up. Those rails are different from one car to the next, so I don't go by any frame point down through here. I go by that bolt going through that lower control arm. All right, that's how I do the front. Let me show you how I do the rear. On the rear here, you can see I'm using my ruler again, sitting on the floor, And I'm doing the exact same thing, but instead I'm using the bolt that goes through the front of the leaf spring. All right, so I get the exact same measurement. I'm going to the center of the bolt, same deal. I'm sitting on the scale, so I'm just going to subtract 2 inches from it. But that's how I do the rear. Now, there's a couple more numbers on the rear I'm going to get for y'all just to show you what's going on with this car. Besides this, we're going to cover those as well. One of the things I've struggled with in showing setup is everybody's mounts on leafs are slightly different because, you know, some people still have the stock mount here for the leaf. Some have this aftermarket like this. Some are home built, like mine's different from side to side, myself too. So what I'm going to show here is center of tube to the top of the leaf, center to leaf. And then that way it doesn't matter how you space or lower, how thick this is. It's just this raw number that goes from the center of the tube to this where you can kind of see and make comparison. So for me, this number right here, I'm going to go and I'm kind of eyeballing it, so it's not going to be perfect, but I'm going to put my numbers on the boards that'll be like representing that right there. See how I'm sitting on the top of the leaf? That's what I'm going to show y'all right there for both sides. Last two numbers on the back of the leaf we're going to show here is I'm going to show shackles center to center. Let's see what that is. And so like I'm at my 7-inch right here on the left side. So we're going to do center to center on shackle, and then we're going to go ground to leaf. And so like you see that 19, which is actually 17 because I'm sitting on a 2-inch tall scale pad. And the reason that I want to show ground to the back of this leaf, now this is not something that I'm not measuring this as a part of my setup in the shop when I'm scaling. But I want to show y'all just because like how this leaf is angled front to rear, that affects anti-squat. And so I want you to see the whole picture on how my car works, where you're not like scratching your head and saying that doesn't make sense, or I can't make my car do that, or whatever. Like you get the whole picture of Dirt Race Life. Here's all the measuring on the board. Let's go through it. So on the left front, you can see I'm 8 inches to the center of the bolt. On the right front, I'm 8 3/8 inches to the center of the bolt. So with me in the car is leaning to the inside toward the left side of the track. Now with me out of the car, these numbers will level up. So there's a big difference there on whether the driver's in the car or not, and making sure you record them the same way every time. Makes a huge difference, y'all. Now on the rear of the car, now here's the left rear. So the front bolt there through the leaf was at 8 3/8 of an inch. The rear bolt through the leaf was at 17 inches. And so this difference right here, this is controlling that angle of the spring. The shackle was 7 inches center to center on the left side, and the center to the leaf, as far as how much it's lowered from the center of the rear end, was 4 inches. Then on the right rear, the front eye bolt through the leaf was at 9 3/8 inches, so you can see again that pitch in the car. Then the rear leaf eye was 19 3/4 inches. The shackle itself on the right side is only 6 inches. And then the center to leaf on the right side, how much that rear end is raised up off that top leaf, 3.5 inches. So I've got a little bit of difference here in my lowering blocks. It's a 1/2 inch difference in my lowering blocks here, with my left side a little bit lower. But then turn around and you see my shackles, I've got a difference as well. My rear height. So there is some difference side to side on my rear of my car. Now I want to talk about this difference between the front bolts on the leaf and the rear bolts on the leaf, and that's a critical thing that you need to be aware of. Let me show you what that looks like. This car has got rake in it from the rear to the front, where I've got the rear end raised up on this car, and the shackles are really important being longer here, because with those lowering blocks and then with me having the rear end raised up, you have to extend the rear of the leaf back down, because I want to show you, like on the leaf, if this is the front eye and this is the rear eye right here, and we've got a leaf right here. So this is the front of the car this way. And we mount this rear end, you know, on this leaf here. This angle right here, that's like a traction bar on the car, and where this angle is at in relation to the car is controlling some of the anti-squat on the car. So as I raise this front eye up in relationship to where this rear end is, then when this rear end torques up, and so when it torques, it's going to torque in this direction. Whenever I step on the accelerator, it's going to twist. And that twisting force is pushing up on the back of the car. So it's loading the rear end. So I step on the gas and it's loading the rear end, all right? And so that's creating dynamic bite, all right? And it's nothing like what a coil car does. It's very different, but it is important. It does affect how a car performs on the track. And so me raising my rear end up is a good thing, because as this point that the front of the spring is attached to the car, as that rises in relationship to where the center of this rear end is, it has more leverage to be able to torque up and climb, you know, like we say, climbing up under the car. Like on a modified and on a cool car, you know, your angle of your bar, you're trying to get angle in that bar so that when you step on the throttle, it'll climb up under the car. They say getting up on the bars. Well, it never gets up on the bar, but there is a force there, and it does load the rear of the car dynamically. And so you put a longer shackle on the back of the car, and then you've got a lowering block in right here. Now the lowering block is important because that's like putting a cheater wrench. Like so, for example, when you're trying to break a bolt loose and you put a long pipe, you know, and you're trying to break it loose, and you've got something seized up or stuck, the longer the pipe is, the easier it is, right? Well, that lowering block right there is what it's doing is it's increasing that torque of the rear end, its ability to twist that leaf spring, raise the car up. So that's why lowering blocks are important. You can go a little bit too far with lowering blocks, you'll start running into wheel hop, all kind of problems when you get out there. Like mine, I'm at 4 inches from the center, I'm at 3.5 inches from the center. It's not the max. I probably could go another inch, but the further you go, the easier it is for you to have the rear end start hopping on you. You start having to really depend on your shocks to control the rear end, and you get a more exaggerated change as you step on and off the throttle, because think about it, the rear end is able to flex more back and forth. So I think my numbers are right, but that's anti-squat. That's why that's really important, you know, for you, like I said, as you raise the back of the car up, to go longer on those shackles. I've seen some cars where the rear frame horns, through crash damage, have gotten bent down some because they still had to run the stock length shackles. There are a lot of different ways to solve this problem, so sometimes you just got to be creative in what will work within your rule set, but just keep in mind that's your goal there. Those are the numbers that this car is actually at. All right, next up, let's see, offsets of the wheels, stagger, and tire pressures. Get all that wrote out just so you can see it on the board here. All right, we're still going. Fixing to get to some good stuff. All right, check this out. Here's those air pressures again. Left front, left rear, right rear. 15 and 18, 14 and 16. I dropped this down to 16 right here. I knew this tire was going to come up because it was a long race. And I dropped this to 18. Normally I've been running 19 and 17 right here. I dropped another pound because I knew everything was going to really warm up and those were going to come up. So that's why that's 1 pound lower there than y'all normally see me do on this car. This is the wheel offsets, and remember, whether it's in the wheel itself or using a spacer, car doesn't know the difference. So like actually from the center of the wheel to the hub, that's what these numbers represent. 2 inches on the left front, 2 inches on the left rear, so they were heads up with each other in line. And then the right front was sitting at 1.5 inches, and then the right rear was at 4 inches. So I had 2.5 inches of offset difference with that right rear tucked in. And that was specifically for a slick track. Front stagger on the car was 3/4 inch. Rear stagger on the car was 1.25 inches. Definitely needs the stagger. Stagger is important, y'all, especially on a leaf spring car. On the front, I had a 900 pound on the left front and a 1050 on the right front. I think I had said 800, 900, and I checked my notes. And then I realized I actually had a 900 on the left front. So I had those heads up. And I ended up at the track going to the 1050 right here, and I put a rubber in this 1050. It was just like a Mr. Gasket, that soft black rubber that's only 3/4 of an inch thick. Put it in on the lowest coil for this, and I think it needed it. That worked very well to improve the car. 175 on the left rear leaf, 225 on the right rear leaf, and I think I may change this again. This is a good move. This is something that leaf spring cars should be doing. You should be changing up and going to a higher number on the right rear. What's good for a coil car is good for a leaf car. There's no difference. What works on one, the same principles apply on a leaf car. And the way the car drove, definitely I'm all sold on that at this point. All right, on the shocks. Still running my Blistering. These are non-rebuildable factory mount location shocks. And I've got an AK digressive on the left front. Now remember, a digressive has got a high number when it's moving slow, and then it softens up when it moves fast. So in other words, when it hits a bump or something, it'll give, but when it's just the motion of the car itself, like through the roll and the turn, it's stronger. That's what digressive means. 197 on the rebound, 154 on the compression. So it's got a little bit more hold down in it than it does compression on this left front. Okay, on this right front right here, I've got the AK linear. And so linear means that it acts the same, like speed difference in how hard the right front gets hit. It's going to have, the numbers are going to be more consistent regardless of the speed. That's a linear, so like the scale is more of a straight line, not a curve if you looked at it on a graph sheet. 393 pounds of rebound, 172 pounds of compression. I don't consider this to be like a tie-down shock, because a tie-down shock is going to be more like a digressive, where that like when it's moving slow, you know, it's going to really hold the shock, but if it hits a bump, it's going to blow off and let the shock move. That would be like a digressive, and that's not what this is. This is more just a general rebound amount. If I was to compare these to like AFCO numbers or something, like this would be like a 5 rebound, 4 compression. This would be more like something like a 8 rebound, 4 compression would be the way to consider these shocks, like in say AFCO numbers or something like that, or Pro Shocks along those lines. I've had these shocks on the car for 3 or 4 years now. I probably need to replace them, but they work really well. I really think these are the right shocks for me for this car. And I'm sticking with them. Like, I'm going to replace them. I'm going to put these same shocks right back on. Unless I know all of my rules would allow rebuildable, in which case I would immediately call Mr. J with like BSB and go rebuildable if I could. I got some classes, some tracks I go to, I can't run rebuildable. So that's the only reason I'm not going with like a good shock. But even then, I would be like, I want to like emulate these in a built shock. On the back, okay, let's get to the good stuff. Bought some brand new AFCOs for the rear of the car. I'd been hunting around with Rachel, putting different shocks on, trying to kind of figure out. What I figured out was I need a lot milder shock on the back of the car, not crazy different numbers. So what I went with a 14 series, only got the 1/2 inch rod on it. These are oil shocks on the back. These Blistings are gas shocks on the front. But these oil shocks on the back in the 14 series with the 1/2 inch rod, 3 rebound, 5 compression. I wouldn't really call this a full traction shock. It just has more compression to kind of hold the car up on the left rear. And then on the right rear, I went with a 5 rebound and 3 compression. So kind of holding the car down, not a tie down shock, but just holding the car down on the right rear a little bit. Now I did move earlier in the racing when I was running on a tacky track. I went with a 4.4 right here. Instead of this 5.3, trying that out. I think the 5.3 is right. I think I probably could have just left this 5.3. I think that's the shocks right here for this car. Whether I'm on a tacky track or a dry slick track, I do think this is the right shocks. I think these are good shocks for a leaf spring car that you want to be able to make work in dry slick, period. I think these are good numbers, y'all. If you're looking for a baseline to start with on your leaf spring car, I'm liking this. Now, let's talk about what I've learned and what I would change. So first thing I want to do is I want to put a line up here. And let's just say that this is track conditions. And so if we were to say on this end we're full tacky, and then on this end we are full dry slick, okay? Now it's not perfect because like you could have, don't think about it as far as like track conditions, because greasy wouldn't be like over here at full tacky because you can't go as fast on greasy. But like this is the fastest the track's going to be, this is the slowest the track's going to be. So think about it along those lines. Full tacky to full dry slick. All right, so if we think about that as far as like this is a scale, you know, like if you thought about it like that right there. Now I want you to think about your car as being a smaller scale with setup. Let me describe that to you. So imagine that your car setup is a scale, and within that scale you were to say this is too loose, you know, no drive, can't go anywhere. All right, and then on this end was too tight, won't turn. You with me? All right, so that's the scale, and it's smaller than this scale of the track. Setup is all about you finding the spot that you as a driver are comfortable within your car to match where the track condition is. That's it. That's all it is to it. And so you have to figure out where you're at as a driver. And I'm going to make this kind of make more sense here. So follow me here, okay? So let's say you as a driver, you're really comfortable, you know, right in here. You like a fairly free car, you know, that drives well. But this car will work in a range from here to here, for example. All right? Right here to here. Now, what you've got to do is you've got to try to figure out what you need to do to the car in order to make this range that you can drive the car in hit where this track's at. So if like full tacky, full dry slick, let's say that it's right here. Okay, that's where the track's at right now. What you've got to do is you've got to adjust your setup to get within that range. And it gets complicated because you know tracks a lot of times will be slick in some places and tacky in some places. There'll be some brown. And so you're trying to balance and find it. Here's what I've learned about the differences between cool cars and leaf cars. That cool car setup window is like this. And that leaf car setup window is like this. This is what I've learned. That the amount of range that you can make a cool car still be drivable, it's wider. It's easier with the cool car maybe necessarily for you to be able to make slight minor adjustments to get the car to get out there to where it qualify good and be able to push it over here to where it's really good in the feature because you've got this wide range that you can make the car work in. All right, and I hope that makes sense. But let's talk about the leaf car and the challenge of the leaf car. So I tend to run my leaf cars tight because everything is going to go slick, slick, slick in the future, in the feature. And so the leaf car has got this narrow range, right? And let's just say, like, if your driving range is within here, you know, that's, you know, too loose and that's too tight, you know, for the car. But the problem is that the range is so narrow that it's way down here. And that was me. That was me like Thursday and Friday. So like when I was qualifying, it was way, way down here. It was like super full tacky. And where my setup on my car was, I was nowhere in the ballpark. What I should have done, I had a 225 on the right rear. That car needs a 250 on the right rear. It does. It needs a 250. And here's why. Because the track was so hooked up and so tight that when I would go into the turn, I was just blowing through that right rear. I could feel it. I could feel the car just rolling and just sitting down through that 225. And then, you know, it was bogging on me. It wasn't turning on me. The right rear wasn't holding low. That's all it was to it. I could have put a 250 on the right rear, and what I would have done is I would have moved the car back, right? I would have moved it back on this, you know, and where I can drive it. I would have moved it back towards, you know, something that would work for qualifying by doing that, by putting that, you know, that 250 right rear on there. Then, come feature time, I could have expanded that car's ability to run on a dry slick track by adding right rear led. And so I'm starting to have to think about these Camaros differently. Thinking about them the same way as a cool car, where that I'm wanting to load the right rear. Everybody wants to drive off the left rear on these leaf spring cars. Guys, get that out of your head. There's no difference. I'll show you what the difference is, okay? We'll talk about the difference. But like I could add right rear led to the car so that it would still get over into the right rear the same. I would still plant the tire the same way. And so I could come up with an adjustment that would help me to expand the range of my Leaf car to still work in the feature. If I'd had a 250 right rear spring on in qualifying, I could have qualified probably top 10 with the car. The car was capable. It was good. The car was really good. I just needed to be able to turn the car. I would have been able to turn the car if I'd had a 250 on the right rear. So that's something I've realized. Another thing to realize with the leaf spring cars is because your range is narrower, get very aggressive with wheel offset. That's something that I have not realized that I'm seeing now, because you can't change springs as easily, like especially on the rear, you can't change springs as easily. You don't have the weight jacks on the rear that work the same way. Move the entire rear of the car using wheel offsets. So get you some 3 offset, 4 offset wheels, and get you some spacers and some really long studs, and shift the entire rear of the car over to the left 2 inches or over to the right 2 inches to get the car to be able to either turn qualifying or continue to apply traction in a dry slick feature. Those are some of the things I've learned. Don't be scared to add lead to the right rear of the car. Go with a stiffer right rear spring on the car and then put the lead it needs on the right rear to load that thing. I had 800 pounds on the scales on that right rear. That means realistically I had 550 to 600 pounds of weight actually pushing down on the spring. And it was definitely planting that right rear in the car. Now, the difference between the cool car, one last thing, and I'll quit worrying y'all with this stuff. So when you're driving this Leaf car and you roll into the corner, you can't tie down the right front of a Leaf car. And the reason you can't is because you don't have a spring that can just continue to extend and the car traction up on a bar and push down off of the spring. It's not how Leaf springs work. As the left rear of this car comes down, at a certain point, it will take weight out of that spring. That spring will start actually holding the rear end up. That's very different from a cool car. And for that reason, your window of like going in and rolling over on the right front and then rolling back on the left rear, it's a smaller amount of movement. It doesn't mean that it's slower. It just means that your balancing act has to match that. You can't put 700 or 800 pounds of rebound on the right front, because all it will do is hold the right front down, and that left rear spring cannot extend down in order to create traction when you're down like that. So on a cool car with 125 pounds, 16 or 18 or 20 inch spring, you've got it preloaded and you can be way down on the right front and that spring is sitting there still applying pressure. Leaf springs don't work like that, but that's okay. You just have to make sure that when your front end compresses down, that the attitude of the car will continue to allow it to apply traction to the left rear and have that balance on the back of the car. It's just different. It's not worse, it's just different. And you have to keep in mind that the setup window is narrower because on the cool car, you do have that ability to run that really soft spring that can just like climb way over. And then that allows you to work with more track conditions. Doesn't mean that you can't be just as fast with a leaf car. It just means that you've got to be more aggressive with the things that you adjust to make sure that you figure out where is that track in the range from full tacky to full dry slick, and then where is your car at? And make sure that you make the adjustment you need to get in the slot. I should have had more right rear spring on the car, then I turned around and should have added lead to compensate for that as the track dried out. Another thing I should have done is when the track was full tacky, I should have stuck that right rear out further. I was scared to stick that right rear out. If I'd have stuck that right rear out and had it sitting out full heads up with the right front, or even out another ½ inch, car probably would have turned a lot better. So don't be scared to go with really aggressive offsets. Would have made a tremendous difference for me, you know, and work with the leaf spring car. Figure out what you can change quickly at the track, and then get in your head where your car's range of drivability is within those track conditions. I promise you, you can still make a leaf car work. You just have to be able to figure out what it takes to get it to match track conditions. Definitely one of the more technical videos. A lot of good stuff here. I've learned a lot from going back and forth between the leafs and the coils. They're a lot more similar than I realized. It's just that, like I said, that setup window, there's a difference there. There's a difference in kind of your range of how much the car can roll over and how you need to treat it differently because of that. But the philosophy is the same as far as like the spring rates and how to make the car work. When you look at the track conditions, it's very similar, and I had not realized that. So I'm just trying to kind of convey some of that. Leave me a comment. Let me know how well I did here, because y'all, I am trying. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe, folks. We're trying to grow this channel as fast as we can. Just trying to make dirt racing better for everybody. I will see y'all next time.